My name's Paul and I'm an addict. I'm here by God's grace and God's mercy. These guys put me over there with a heckler. Listen, I've been to a lot of places. I've done a lot of stuff for Narcotics Anonymous. I ain't never experienced what I just experienced. The energy in this room, the fire in this room. You know, I was told quite some time ago that you got to be excited for your recovery. You're excited for your recovery. And if you're not excited for your recovery, the disease is excited for your relapse. So continue to be excited for your recovery. I don't know what that was all about earlier today with Tony. I think he made $160. I'm not even going to stand up here and tell you I'm getting hot. Just saying. Listen, I'm telling you, I'm not lying to you. I'm not lying to you. I got here and I went to a home group on Thursday night over here, a local home group, and I felt the excitement right there. I felt the fire right there, and I knew there was something here, man. You know, I'm an NA guy, man, and there's not a lot of guys that can say they're NA guys. You know, I've taken a lot of hits in Narcotics Anonymous. I've taken some spiritual hits in Narcotics Anonymous. But I've been through the ringer, man. I'm definitely a no matter what guy. That we are proud of you, we are proud of you, we are proud of you touched me. For a long time, I just wanted people to be proud of me, man. For a long time. Tito, where's Tito at? Tito, man, yeah, man, you kicked us off right, man. Kicked us off right. I want to thank the program committee, everybody that's a part of this convention. I know there's a lot of unseen work that goes into something like this, so let's give them a round of applause, please. I think the banquet dinner sold out. I'm not sure, but that was a good dinner, man. That was a good dinner, man. They really put it together, you know. I'm an eater, so I don't just say that. You know, I love my food. So yeah, let's do this, right? I need to get out of my heart. I'm sorry, I need to get out of my head and get into my heart. So let's just say a quick prayer, all right? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. As much as I saw all the excitement and I heard all the craziness and the rowdiness, right? Every time I saw that there was a moment for silence, I noticed that. The room got silence. I appreciate that, man. This is about saving lives. You know, and anytime I get an opportunity to carry the message of Narcotics Anonymous, I don't want to mess it up because it's a life-saving message. Addicts are dying. Addicts are dying, you know. I got a story that needs to be told, should be told. It's a shame if it goes untold, and the only way I can continue to tell it is to stay clean one day at a time. I like to say that the way I like to share my story is to be authentic, to be transparent, and to be genuine. Anytime you come from the heart, you can't miss the heart. I know God didn't bring me all the way from Florida, right? Placed me up here in Sawdust. Is it Sawdust? I don't know what you guys were smoking or drinking, but man, a lot of electricity up here. And I noticed that the disease of addiction is alive and well. It's alive and well here. I left my wonderful family, my wonderful wife, my grandkids, and my children to come up here to let you know that I'm a proud member of Narcotics Anonymous. It wasn't always like that, though. It wasn't always like that. You know, I'm going to be 57 years old. I came into Narcotics Anonymous when I was 20 years old. I was the guy that came in and out. There were people that would sit next to me and get up and move. You know, I was just one of those addicts. I was a knucklehead, man. And I know there's addicts in here right now that came to Narcotics Anonymous and they got this from day one. They never found it necessary to go back out and use. That's a powerful story. Powerful story. That's not my story. I was a knucklehead. You know, I put some clean time together and then I go back out. You know, to be honest with you, I'd put some clean time together and I go pick up the prostitute on the corner. Right? And I'd start feeling like a piece of shit. I would feel like the same piece of shit that I felt like I was in the shooting gallery, and I'd go get high. Or I'd put my hands on somebody, because I always dealt with things with my hands. And there was something about acting out in those mannerisms, and that would always bring me to a place where I was never going to change. I was always going to be the same person, you know. I want to tell you, they let me cross the border. Listen, only another recovering addict understands another recovering addict. Only another addict gets another recovering addict, right? So I'm proud, man. You should have saw me. You should have saw me at the falls. You should have saw me going through customs. I had 32 charges when I was 20 years old. 32 charges. And I remember there came a point in time where I wanted to change my ways and find a better way to live, and I wanted to do some things. I ended up getting a state contractor's license in the state of Florida. Back then, criminals didn't have their rights to vote, so I ended up getting my rights reinstated to vote. I ended up getting my concealed weapon license, and there was a reason why I did that. I wanted to protect my castle. But for some reason, right? I didn't think I was going to make it across the border. I don't know. It's like that stinking thinking in your head that something's going to pop up, And when I got across the border, I can't even articulate it. I can't even really put it into words. The gratitude that I felt, And gratitude's an action word for me. It's not just lip service, I was trying to tell Joe about how I was feeling, and he says, man, it sounds like you had a form of forgiveness for yourself. And I like that. I like that. I did a lot of damage to myself. I did a lot of damage to others. I did a lot of damage in the community. And man, I'm just grateful to be here. I want to back up and I want to tell you, I was a project kid. I was the only white kid in a black neighborhood with a blonde afro like this. And I used to run through the neighborhood, right, giving everybody double birds, right? And I was a really troubled kid, My dad walked out on me when I was 1 year old. I had an older brother and an older sister. I always wanted to hang out with my older brother, but he was always kicking me to the curb. I come from a Portuguese, Cape Verdean descent. I was ashamed to be Portuguese. Today I'll fly a Portuguese flag in front of my house. I don't care, I'm proud of myself today, right? But there was a time I was ashamed, My mom raised 3 kids by herself, and I used to hear stories in the neighborhood about how beautiful my mom was, and all the guys used to fight over her, She was Miss New Bedford, and she was a beautiful, beautiful lady, And my dad ended up scooping her up, Come to find out, he was a player, And he stepped out on her a lot, and she was a really thick-headed, stubborn Portuguese. She wasn't going to stand for that, So she left him, And she raised three kids. She raised 3 kids by herself on welfare. I'm probably going to talk about some very uncomfortable things, some things that most members don't want to talk about. I'm going to talk about. Mental illness is real, man. Mental illness is real. I watched my mom, who's like one of the most beautiful girls in the neighborhood, that they told me anyways, right? And I watched her deal with mental illness back in the 70s, right? And back in the 70s, the way they treated mental illness was with shock treatment. I heard they still do that, but they've come a long way with that. I remember as a small child, I'd go visit my mom, right? And there'd be bars on the window, right? There'd be a rubber room. There'd be people in straitjackets, That messed me up as a kid, man. There's something about moms that are so special, And my mom was like this, right? She would get on medicine. She'd start doing really good, right? She'd get all her kids back. She'd set up the house, get all the clothes. She'd be doing really, really good, right? And she'd stop taking her medicine. So she'd go back and forth, back and forth. I'm talking about decades, man. Decades. So when I hear people talk about having a really good relationship with their mom, man, I never had that. I never really had that, When I hear people talking about having a relationship with their dads, I never had that. My dad walked out on me when I was 1 year old. But I'm going to tell you, there was a spirit that dwelled within me, right, that I wanted to be a dad. That was the only thing I really wanted to be, was a dad. And I know it comes from not having a dad. I didn't know how I was going to be a dad, right? When I was 19 years old, I took this girl, she was a virgin, and I took her hostage, man. And I was a street kid, man. I'm not going to stand up here, we see... I know we were sharing about war stories and they're funny and all. Look, we share our war stories for identification, right? And we share our experience, right, for solutions. Okay? And I'm going to tell you, Narcotics Anonymous has been the solution for me for quite some time. All right? And I was always trying to get clean, stay clean, and find a new way to live, and I always struggled, man. I always struggle. I no longer struggle with wanting to use anymore. I just don't. I can't associate it to an event, to a feeling. And I was the guy always getting high, right? And after I finish sharing my story, you're probably going to shake your head and wonder why I didn't get high, or why you didn't blame me for getting high, or would blame me for getting high. But I took this girl hostage, right? And she was a virgin. She didn't even swear. She just, man, she was an angel, man. She didn't know anything about the streets. And I was out there sticking needles in my arm, man. And back in those days, everybody was dying of the virus. My best friend Mike, he was 300 pounds. He wasn't even 21 years old. He ended up dying from the virus, But anyways, I'm out there running around with prostitutes. I'm sharing dirty needles, and I'm taking this back home, And one night, my wife said to me, she says, I'm pregnant. And I just got home off a 5-day run. And I looked at her, and I just turned over. I had this spirit in me. I wanted to be a dad. I didn't know how to be a dad. I'm running the streets, right? What did I have a child? What did I have to offer a child, And I remember seeing a meeting list inside of a shooting gallery. That's where I found my first meeting. It was in a meeting list in a shooting gallery. And I went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And in that Narcotics Anonymous meeting, I saw people that were looking pretty damn good, man. I saw people that I was getting high with, I was using with, and they were smiling, and they were having a good time. I didn't understand exactly how they were doing it, but I wanted what they had. I didn't stay, though. I went back out. I was always in and out of jails. I was always in and out of institutions. I was always trying to get clean. And then there was people that came into Narcotics Anonymous after me, right? Because I kept going back and forth. And I remember them celebrating. I remember them getting the cakes and the cards and the balloons. And I'd be like, I'd be flipping them off because I couldn't do what they were doing. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Anyways, in 1994, right, I was in the recovery process again, and I got a phone call I had done some blood work, and I was told that I was exposed to hepatitis A, B, C, D, and E, all 5 strains, right, of the hepatitis. I found out later in Narcotics Anonymous they call that a royal straight flush, you know what I mean? But I was exposed to everything back then, right? And they also told me I was HIV positive. That was 35 years ago, man. Hey, back then, you got the virus, you got 2 to 3 years to live. Everybody was dropping like flies. And if you got on the medicine, you still went. You know? And I did a lot of observing, I did a lot of watching, I did, so I was stubborn. I didn't get on the medicine, I waited, and time took time and the medicine got better. I'm not dying with the virus, I'm living with the virus. Hey, and I know I don't look like I have the virus, right? So, I'm taking care of myself, and I know it's from coming to Narcotics Anonymous. It's from being good to myself. And today, I used to think being good to myself was being first at the cooker, or having a fistful of packages, or a pocket full of money. Today, I know being good to myself is going to the doctors, putting a seatbelt on in the car, going to a meeting, going to the gym, doing some of those loving things that I need to do, right? And listen, I didn't always talk about this either. But I learned through my step work that I had to go into the darkness, right? The theme of this convention is miracle, man. We probably got about 800 miracles in here right now. 800 miracles in here right now. As far as the hepatitis, man, oh man, I've seen so many people, I did treatment 3 times and it didn't work. The only thing it did was piss off my liver. I want to tell you, my first wife, I've been married twice, my first wife, man, she used to call me an AIDS face, no good for nothing junkie. AIDS face, no good for nothing junkie. She was my angel, man. My son that was born, I took him hostage. I brought him to meetings with me. I brought him to conventions with me. I was on borrowed time, man. Back then, I'm telling you, 2 to 3, that's what you thought you had, I remember my son, man, he would know who had the crayons, he would know who had the candy, and they just loved him up, We ended up moving. They say I'm from Florida, but I'm originally from Boston. I don't know if you can figure that out yet. But anyways, right? I live in Florida, right? And somebody asked me today what made me go to Florida, right? And really, I wanted to get my son out of the noise, man. Because in my neighborhood, you open the window, you could hear the noise, man. You could hear it, Drive-by shootings, mira, ven acá, dame barato, dame manteiga, It was crazy. It was really crazy, right? And I didn't want my son to grow up like that. I went down to Florida. It was the best decision I ever made. My ex-wife, I finally got to 5 years clean, and she says, "Oh, you still got to go to those meetings?" I said, "Absolutely, I still got to go to those meetings," And somewhere along the line, she fell out of love with me. At least that's what she told me during counseling, because I wanted, any relationship worth keeping is worth working on it, right? And I was going to work on that relationship until my arms fell off, She was the mother of my son, I loved her. She was my angel, and I mistreat her all the time. I was always stepping out of the relationship, I was always breaking promises. I was always screwing up the check, I was always relapsing. But at this point in time in my life, I didn't understand why all of a sudden she told the counselor that she was falling out of love with me. Like, I looked at her and I said, well, I didn't screw up the checkbook. I didn't put my hands on you, right? I didn't cheat on you, right? I'm staying clean. I'm going to meetings. And it was shortly after that I found out why she fell out of love with me. I met the person she was falling in love with. And he was a cop. Listen, I don't know if you heard what I just said, right? Look, I started stalking this cop. I mean, who does that, right? Who does that, man? I started bugging out, man. And it was getting really, really serious, man. Like she would tell me, knock it off, man. You're going to end up in jail, you know. I got to the point in my recovery when I ended up hugging the guy. Because that's what I learned in Narcotics Anonymous. Especially when we have some like resentments and stuff towards somebody, we go up to them, we hug them, we cuss them out while we're hugging, but anyways, we hug them, we hold them really tight, and we say a prayer for them, right? Hey, listen, man, he treats her very, very well. Better than I've ever treated her, And she, so anyways, so here I am, 40 years old, right? I'm all diseased up, right? I got sicknesses, I got illnesses, I got diseases, and I'm 40 years old, and I got to learn how to date, right? So I'm learning how to date in Narcotics Anonymous, right? And I'm going to counseling, right? And I remember telling the counselor, look, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never dated, I got to learn how to date, And he gave me a suggestion. He said, I suggest to you that on the first date, you tell them everything. I said, are you crazy? Are you crazy? Who does that, right? And what he was talking about was being, he was talking about vulnerability. He was talking about being transparent. He was talking about being authentic. He was talking about being genuine. He probably saved me a lot of money too, right, on the first date. But it was a good suggestion. I want to tell you, I did a lot of dating in Narcotics Anonymous. I went outside of Narcotics Anonymous. I went to church dating, I went to the grocery store looking for a girl, And I found out you can find a dented can in the grocery store too. I didn't want it. I'm not one of those guys that sits in the meeting with my arms crossed, mean mugging everybody, wanting to face fight everybody and tell you I don't want to be with nobody. Look, I knew I wanted to be with somebody. Okay? I knew I wanted to be with somebody, although I did stay in a relationship for quite some time too, as well, later on. And that was very, very, very rewarding. I did the fish tank thing, I did the plant thing, I paid my bills, I cut my own grass, I did all that, and it was very rewarding. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. I'm just glad I'm not there anymore. So anyways, I finally found this girl, right? And she was 11 years younger than me. Hey, she was the baddest looking girl in the rooms, man. Baddest looking girl in the rooms. Every time I went somewhere, man, it was like the young guys were always disrespecting me, and we'd go to conventions, they'd be, looking her up and down, and then the old timers would say, Paulie, that girl's going home with you, man. You know that, right? And I needed them to tell me that because, it was a good suggestion. I didn't want to end up in jail clean, right, over a girl, definitely, And it helped me a lot because she did go home with me. And I love this girl. Madly in love with her. I wanted to marry her. She was all sponsored up. She's working steps. I'm all sponsored up. I'm working steps. And I remember on that 1 year anniversary of dating, I went to her place of work. She was a waitress, and I went over there, and I was going to get on one knee, and I did. I got on one knee, and I think she thought I was going to propose to her. I had this key made up for my house, and I asked her to move in with me. That's what I did. Listen, I was being sponsored up. People are trying to guide me with this, right? And they're telling me, let time take time. Let her work on herself. You work on yourself. Don't move in with her on the first weekend. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what we do, right? And then something changed. She used. And I say that to say this. When she used, she took me right back to my ex-wife and everything I put her through. Now I was worried about the stealing, the cheating, the lying, because it was all popping up and it was all flaring up in the relationship, But I'm one of those guys that believes I love the underdog. I mean, anybody that knows me knows I love the newcomer, anybody struggling. Matter of fact, right, my sponsor tells me as long as I touch one person tonight, I've done my job up here. One person. And I don't know who that one person is, right? I don't know if it's the newcomer. I don't know if it's the old-timer. I don't know if it's the in-betweener. But all I got to do is touch one person, and I've done my job, okay? I'm going to tell you, she used, and my walls went up, and I was bugging out, man. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a relationship with the other person using, man. It's insanity. It's insanity. So anyways, we got this spiritual retreat that we do down here. It's a big NA function. It's almost kind of set up the way you guys have it set up here, where everybody travels like 4, 5, 6 hours from all over the place. Areas, home groups, all that, right? And we're doing that, right? So we're going this spiritual retreat. And now all my guys are going, my motorcycle's going, I'm ready to go have a good time down in the Keys. And we get into a fight, right? She's in early recovery again. We get into a fight. She stood with me that night. We get into a fight. To be honest with you, I'm a traveler, right? So when I leave the house, I like the house looking nice. So when you come back, the house still looks nice. And she's doing her hair and doing this and throwing this and doing that and making a mess out of the whole floor, right? And I says, you know what? I ain't going to the spiritual retreat. You go to the spiritual retreat. You know what she did? She went to the spiritual retreat. I sat home pouting. My motorcycle got trailed down there that year, and she went down there and she had a really good time. And when we go away for any type of NA event or function, we always come back with the cup full or overflowing, right? And she came back, she's waving a CD of this girl from my old neighborhood. I knew who the main speaker was. I took the CD. I used to name drop the person, but I don't do that no more. And I threw it. I threw the CD and I said, I'm not worried about that. I want to tell you, make-up sex is the best sex there is. Right? Man. That night, my twin boys were conceived. Joshua and Christian, was conceived that night. I also, as I look back, and because perspective always changes later on, right? And as I look back, right, I said, you know what? Like anytime we have, like especially a co-ed, like spiritual retreat or gathering, you know what the most spiritual thing that happens 9 months later? That went over some people's heads. I know that, right? 9 months later, my boys were conceived. And born. Listen, like, I was so ready to be a dad. I was going to be the best dad. Oh, man, I was so ready to be a dad. I was doing everything with my oldest son. Everything with my oldest son. I coached the football team, the basketball team, the soccer team, man. I did the all-star team. I did, we did karate. I did homework. Like me and my oldest son, we became jointed at the hip because I always felt like I was on borrowed time, And now I was blessed with 2 more boys, man. Oh, listen, one was going to be the pitcher, the other one was going to be the catcher. One was going to be the quarterback, the other one was going to be the wide receiver. You know what I mean? My kids ended up having bank accounts. I got them bank accounts right away, and I had so much excitement, being a dad. And she used again, She continued to use, and I ended up getting full custody of my kids, I remember having stacks of 9. I remember changing 18 diapers a day. I remember waking up real early. The motorcycle would stay parked, Man, I don't even, looking back on those days, they say with the men and the women with the women. I was reaching out to all the women in Narcotics Anonymous. And they were helping me. The first night, because, what I didn't tell you is I was the first one in the NIC unit, right? They were 5 pounds, each of them. I was the first one in the NIC unit, and it was like hitting the lottery times 2, right? And I remember the first thing I did was make sure they didn't have that blonde afro, you know what I mean? But my kids came home with me, and she didn't, you know. And I was so ready. I was just so ready, and I was going to do whatever I had to do. And reaching out to the women in Narcotics Anonymous, they totally helped me. Totally helped me. But again, man, I believe in miracles, right? And if you don't know the definition, for me, my definition of a miracle is when you know something's going one way, absolutely going to go in that direction. There's absolutely not going to go in that direction. Then all of a sudden it goes in a different direction. That's my definition of a miracle. So she wanted to get clean again, and she wanted to be in the boy's life. Absolutely. Why wouldn't I want you to be in the boy's life, you know? And so I had full custody. I had to give that up, and that was tough, man. Like I didn't miss any doctor's appointments. I took a lot of pictures, you know. And one night I got a phone call, and she's screaming. And she found my 2 boys face down in the backyard swimming pool. They were both dead. They both went to, one went to one hospital, another one went to a different hospital, and my oldest son was there when I got the phone call. And I ain't never been hit so hard in my life. And I've been rocked, man. I've been rocked. I ain't never been hit so hard in my life, and my knees buckled, and I remember screaming. I was actually just finishing taking a shower. I got asked to do a talk at a home group on the 11th step, and you know I was on my way to go drop it like it was hot, you know, and then all of a sudden I never made it to that meeting, you know. But I'm going to tell you, the meeting made it to me, and I remember NA showing up at the hospital, you know. I remember my oldest son scooping me up, man, and I didn't have no shoes on. I just had a pair of shorts on. I didn't even have my phone with me, and anybody that knows me, I always got my phone with me, you know. And I remember getting to the hospital, and like the whole group was there, you know. And I remember hearing people say, maybe I should give him my shoes, or maybe I should give him a shirt, or... Anyways, my oldest twin, Josh, he passed right away, man. And I remember seeing there was like 12 different doctors and nurses, and they were like performing CPR on him. And look, you want to talk about practicing a step 1 and being powerless? I ain't never been so powerless like that in my whole life. I wanted to go be with my son. I wanted to go see my son. I didn't even know which one it was, man. I'm going to tell you, the first night they came home from the hospital, right, I had a king-size bed by myself, and I put one on one side of the bed, the other one on the other side of the bed, and all night long I rolled from one side to the other side, right? And I learned from that, because the second night I put them both close together on one side, right? And then I got really, really smart, and I started color coordinating them, right? Because listen, with twins, right, it was like when they were together, I could tell them apart, but when they were separate, I had a hard time. You know what I mean? I still today don't know if I mixed them up or got them confused, you know? But I noticed there was a birthmark on my oldest twin boy, and I wanted to get to that birthmark. I wanted to make sure that was Joshua, you know? And before that even happened, my oldest son was there. He comes sliding across the floor, and he started praying with me. Both of us started praying. And I found out my other son got revived. My all-time hero, my baby boy Christian, man. He actually died 3 times, you know, on the way to the hospital. You know, I know this is uncomfortable, right? But I got to talk about this. I really do. I got a story that needs to be told, you know, and if it doesn't get told, it's a shame, man. The thought of using never came. It never came. I became homicidal. I became suicidal. I cried for 13 months straight. I didn't even know the human eye could produce so much water, man. I went to bed crying. I woke up crying. You know, I was going to take my life. I was going to take your life. My baby boy, Christian, became an organ donor. And I remember before he donated his organs, his kidneys and his liver, I remember fighting with the doctor, and I remember saying, look, doc, I need a liver. That liver is going to be mine. You know what I mean? And they told me, he said, look, you can't put an infant's liver into an adult's body. You just can't do that. It don't work that way, you know? So needless to say, I didn't get the liver. A little boy named Jose, he was 1 year old, out of Texas, got his liver. That boy ended up getting nominated in Boston Medical Hospital for not even needing rejection medication. You want to talk about miracles? The kidneys went to a local girl. She was 18 years old. She was going to be 19 years old. She was 90 pounds soaking wet. And on the third day, they called me at the house and they told me that they found a recipient for the kidneys. And I don't know if anybody's ever had tears of joy when you're crying and smiling at the same time. I was crying and smiling at the same time when I found out, you know. And they told me it was a perfect fit, right? And I don't know what it is about Facebook, but I've had a couple of things happen to me on Facebook, and this girl found me on Facebook, right? And she got a hold of me and she told me, she says, Paul, you don't understand. My whole life, all I wanted to do was be a mom, you know? And they kicked me out of school. I lost my driving privileges. You know, I was always depressed. I was on dialysis for 5 years. And I says, I do understand, because all I ever wanted to be was a father my whole life, and I was struggling with some sicknesses and some diseases. Her mom found out about my liver, and her mom walked me through the process of doing treatment one more time. And I remember her walking through like the grant. I was doing the grant, right? And I'm filling out the grant, and it's asking me, I'm being honest, like I got money, I got a house, I got a motorcycle, and I'm telling the truth, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, even if I do get the grant and I get the medicine, it's not going to work anyways. I already did treatment, you know. They wanted $1,000 a pill. I got the grant. Not only did I get the grant, they wanted to give me a double dose because they said I had a double-edged sword. So they wanted to give me, instead of 12 weeks, they gave me 25 weeks. And within like 6 or 8 weeks, it started working. But I didn't stop there, right? I kept doing it. I did it the full 25 weeks, you know. Look, I want to give somebody some hope, man. I want to cast hope, man. Like, I want to help somebody, you know. I want to help somebody. I went to the doctors. Now, mind you, 6 months after my kids died, I got a phone call and they told me that my liver was stage 4, level 4 cirrhosis of the liver, and a 25 million vital load count. My skin turned yellow, my eyes were turning yellow. Everybody that didn't know I had hepatitis C knew I had hepatitis C. And when I went to the doctors told me, he said, man, your liver's pristine. I didn't even know what that word meant, right? I went home and I looked the word up, man. It's a badass word, man. It's a badass word. My liver's pristine today, you know. I never needed my son's liver. I never needed my son's liver, you know. And you want to talk about the full circle of life, you know. The girl that got my son's kidneys, you know, she called me up not too long afterwards, probably about a year and a half after that, and she said that she was pregnant, you know, and she wanted me to be there in the NICU. I held the baby in my hands. The baby was 3.5 pounds.
when the baby was born. I don't know if you've ever seen a 3.5-pound baby, but you could see through the skin. And she named the baby Arabella, which means answered prayer. She just celebrated her 8th birthday. Look. I don't know if you guys know what canned recovery is, right? But canned recovery is you already know what you're going to get out of the can when somebody's sharing. That's not my style, man. I don't know where I'm going with this. Like I don't know where I'm going with this. But I do believe there's somebody in here that needs to hear my story. There's somebody in here that needs my story. My grandfather committed suicide. He was one of us. My mother, from my father's side, ended up dying after giving birth to my father. I had an uncle die from the AIDS virus. I had 2 other uncles go to war, and one of them came back. They were both like 18 years old, and it ripped my family apart, man. It was like this: why did your son come home and my son didn't? You know, and my family was pretty knitted tight until stuff like that was happening. I always felt like I had this generation curse, you know, like this dark cloud going over me. And I kind of felt that when I came into Narcotics Anonymous. I was like, why do I keep coming here? And I end up I end up high again, you know. But the disease of addiction is in the business of taking lives, man. And there's also something that I like to call the violent destructive force, right, that wants to steal, kill, and destroy me. It really does. I believe that today. What I didn't tell you in the beginning, right, is I wanted to thank God for Narcotics Anonymous. I want to thank God for bringing me to Narcotics Anonymous, and I want to thank Narcotics Anonymous for pointing me to a relationship with God through the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. I want to tell you that all the steps in Narcotics Anonymous, each and every one of them is about a relationship. From step 1 to step 12 is all about relationships. It's all about relationships. The first 3 is about a relationship with a God. The next 4 is about a relationship with myself. The next 3 after that is about a relationship with others. And the last 2 are about keeping the peace in all those relationships. And I'm also going to tell you that every relationship is practice and preparation for the next relationship. I learned that dating. Let me tell you, I learned that dating. I did a lot of dating, right? And sponsorship is the most important thing that happens in Narcotics Anonymous. I had the same sponsor for almost 35 years. He stuck by me, man. Everybody kicked me to the curb. This guy stuck by me. And I'm so indebted to him. About 4 years ago, I changed sponsors. Listen, one of the most hardest things I've ever had to do. That was worse than my first divorce, man. Hey, look, we were jointed at the hips, you know. We were 2 peas in a pod. Sponsorship wasn't looking like what sponsorship should be looking like anymore, you know. And I want to say, right around 17 or 18 years clean, it was almost like a light bulb went off, you know. I had to, you know, people say grow up or die, you know, work the steps and live, and I believe in that. I believe that, like, if I continue to do some of the same things that I always did, I was always going to get what I always got, right? But I was going to end up high at some point in time, you know. I can't let my character defects finish off the job that the disease of addiction didn't finish. I don't know what that means for you, but I know what that means for like putting my hands on people and stepping out of my relationships, hooking up, you know, with the girls and going to the casino. Look, there's nothing spiritual about going to the casino. I'm going to tell you that right now. And those places get bigger and bigger every time, man. And I'm going to tell you, there's jail cells, there's dirty jail cells for clean addicts too, you know. On the 1-year anniversary of my boy's death, I ended up getting tasered, right? And I don't suggest anybody get tasered clean. they dragged me. Look, I'm an H&I guy. I've always been an H&I guy, you know. And they dragged me right back to the same jail where I was carrying the H&I minute. I got 10 minutes left. Carrying the H&I message, you know. And I had blood on my head from, you know, I don't know, like, I didn't use, right? And I learned from that, right? I really did. I learned from that. I remember there was another time, you know, there's something about holidays. There was a holiday that came up, and I remember because I haven't been grieving without faith, you know, I haven't been grieving without hope, you know. I know where my kids are, and I'm going to be with them someday, but I'm not in a rush to be with them anymore. You know, and what I mean by that is I can do it in a destructive way. Like when I tell you that I was talking, and I was planning to hurt myself, I had a plan. You know, one time I had my 9mm, and I'm on my bed, and I'm looking up at the walls and the ceilings, and I'm saying, God, free will, right? God, free will, right? Right? Free will, God, free will, right? God. And I'm telling you, my eyes are bulging out of my head. These tears and snot's coming out of my head, and just, and all of a sudden, it just got peaceful. And I believe that was God's grace and God's mercy on me. Another time, I took my 9mm and I was going to beeline it because I heard that my ex hooked up with somebody, right? I had a plan. I was going to hurt somebody, you know. And then some girl found me on Facebook. I don't know how. She found me on Facebook, and I want to say it was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. She called me up, and she says, what are you doing, you know? And I'm a good recovering addict. I told her what I was doing. I was plotting and planning on hurting somebody, you know? Hey, these guys laugh, right? But she talked me off the edge, man. And I remember saying to her, like, who the hell are you? You know, and what's your name? And she told me her name was Angel. She was a Spanish girl. She had a sexy voice, and I believe, you know, I believe, man. I believe. I'm so glad I didn't use. I'm so glad I didn't tap out. I'm so glad I didn't hurt anybody, you know. I ended up meeting somebody else, you know. She's not 11 years younger than me. She's a year younger than me. And she's a wonderful person, man. She's an amazing person. I've been with her for 10 years, been married for her for 5 years. She gave me 2 bonus kids. And one of the kids loves to work and make babies. That's all he wants to do. He's given me 3 grandkids. My oldest son, every time I celebrate, I get a medallion, I bring it to the gravestone. You know, I bring it to the gravestone. And every time I celebrate, my oldest son will text me, and he'll tell me, Dad, you know I got more clean time than you, right? My oldest son's never found it necessary to use. He's 35 years old. The cycle of his disease has been broken. I want to tell you, my kids were only here for 13 months. They weren't born with the virus. They didn't have the virus. They were miracles, man. They were my mini-me's, you know. And I know their lives still live on. My oldest son gave me another boy. I got three boy grandboys. I'm sorry, and a grandgirl, Haven. She's 6 months old. They all call me Pop Pop, and I love it. Me and my wife just finally bought a house together, and I was talking to them tonight, and all the grandkids slept over, you know. And they wanted to go. They all know how to swim, you know, except for Haven. She knows how to do the face up first. I don't know if anybody's ever saw that skill, but she just learned how to do that. And they all went there, and they're spending time at the house in the swimming pool. I heard the boys were fighting over who's going to have the top bunk and stuff like that, you know. Listen, man, I am not the same person that came in here 35 years ago. I'm not the same person that came here 20 years ago. I'm not even the same person that came here 5 years ago. I continue to work on change. I'm one of those guys I'm going to stretch and grow. And what I need to tell you is when I changed sponsors, that was a power move for me. And I'm going to shut it down here. And I don't know if you're struggling in sponsorship, right? But if your sponsor's not visible and available and he's not active, you're in trouble, man. You know? You're in trouble. It was a power move for me. My new sponsors added so much value to my recovery in such a short period of time, you know. But I will never forget my predecessors either. You know, I'm indebted to my previous sponsor. He's family. I'd do anything for him. You know. Anyways, thanks for listening. Thanks for having me up here.
Wow. What else can I say but wow? Paulie, on behalf of Orkney 36, Narcotics Anonymous as a whole, thank you, brother. What a message of hope